In this session, we'll be discussing how to declare entities within a DTD. Entity is a placeholder for content which you declare once and can use many times almost anywhere in the document. It does not add anything semantically to the markup. Rather, it's a convenience to make XML easier to write, maintain, and read. Entities can hold a single character, a string of text, or even a chunk of XML markup. An entity consists of a name and a value. This is how we declare, or this is the syntax of an entity. This is a syntax for declaring an entity within DTD, where it starts with the delimiter entity. Entity name is the name of the entity. Entity value is the value which the entity holds. This is an example for the same. Here, GFGC is the name of the entity, and Government First Grade College is the value which the entity holds. Entity reference. A reference to an entity is its name with a prepended ampersand and an appended semicolon. A parser replaces the entity reference with the appropriate replacement text or markup when it encounters the entity reference as it scans the XML document. If this reference appears 10 times in the document, the parser replaces it with the appropriate text, replacement text. The replacement text here is Government First Grade College. Next, internal entities. Internal entities are most often used to stand in for often repeated phrases, names, and texts. Not only is an entity reference easier to type than a long piece of text, but it also improves accuracy and maintainability, since you have to change an entity once for the effect to appear everywhere. So if you have to add something to this, say Government First Grade College Karnataka, instead of changing it everywhere in the document, simply you can change it in the entity and that will be reflected everywhere in the document. An example for internal entity is this. Next, external entities. Sometimes you may need to create an entity for such a large amount of content that it is impractical to fit all inside the entity declaration. In such cases, you should use an external entity, an entity whose replacement text exists in another file. External entities are useful for importing the content that is shared by many documents or that changes too frequently to be stored inside the document. The syntax for external entity declaration is this: entity, the name of the entity. We use a system keyword along with the document where the text or the content is stored. Next, types of entities. Entities can be primarily of 4 types. First, built-in entities. There are 5 built-in entities. They are ampersand, single quote, greater than, lesser than, and double quote. Here, all the references are replaced by respective characters whenever the processor encounters this. Let's see an example at the end of the video. Next, character entities. Character entities are used to name some of the entities which are symbolic representation of information, that is, characters that are difficult or impossible to type can be substituted by character entities. Here, this reference will give a copyright symbol. Next, general entities. Instead of representing only a single character, general entities can represent characters, paragraphs, and even entire document. Here, a reference to this entity will be replaced with, or the parser will replace this entity reference with hi. So whenever there's a reference for company name, that will be replaced with hi. Next, parameter entities. The purpose of parameter entity is to enable you to create reusable sections of replacement text. Suppose you have an element declaration like this. Say element residence has a few other elements like name, street, pin code, city, phone, and the next element apartment has also the same elements. Again, shop element also has the same elements. Right now, suppose you want to add additional element to additional element country, then you need to add it. You need to add it to all 4 declarations. Hence, we can go for parameter entity reference. Parameter entity reference will be like this. So you have to declare, say you have declared an entity with name area. It starts with entity delimiter area, and you can give the elements inside this. And parameter entities are dereferenced in the same way as general entity reference, only with % sign instead of an ampersand. See, instead of general entities are dereferenced like this with ampersand and a semicolon, whereas parameter entities will be dereferenced with the % sign along with a semicolon. Let's see an example. I've already written the code. And the first type of the entity is the built-in entities. As we've already discussed, there are 5 built-in entities: ampersand, single quote, greater than, lesser than, and double quotation. Okay, we'll validate it. Okay, and let's see the output of it. Okay, I'll just okay, if you can see here, under example, there's an element A. Inside element A, we have used these entities, and these are replaced with the appropriate characters. Okay, ampersand, greater than, and lesser than. The next is the next type of entity is character entity. Character entities here, copyright is a character entity, and we have given this. So whenever the parser comes across this reference, it will be replaced with a copyright symbol. Next, general entities. Just for an example, I've given as company name as hi. So whenever we give this reference, the parser will replace it with the appropriate replacement text. Now have a look at the structure of this XML document. A root element is example. Under example, there are there are so many elements: A, B, C, D, and E. So there are 5 elements under example. Then, if you can see, if you can observe, under D, there are again 3 elements: A, B, C. Here also ABC, under D also ABC is there, ABC are there, ABC elements are there. Under E, again the same 3 elements are repeated. Now comes the picture of the parameter entities. Let's see how we have declared it, or how we have declared parameter entities inside a DTD. So this is the parameter entity. Entity para is the name we have given to that. Then ABC, other elements which will be repeated in example element, D element, and E element. Okay, see, element, example, okay, para, D and E, all these 3. Okay, we have already discussed these things in detail in the previous videos. Then inside D element, we have used this entity. See how we have dereferenced it: % sign, para, and a semicolon. Okay, this is an example of parameter entities. So instead of repeating everywhere, just for example, we have given ABC, but in real-time examples, you can use the appropriate ones. So instead of repeating it every time, they simply use the entity names. If you have to make any changes to the elements, you can simply change it in the element here. That will be reflected everywhere in the document. Okay, this is how the document looks. I hope this much is clear.